salesman needs to be reminded more than need to be taught.
But more importantly, it's really simple, to have a conversation and say, do you have any clients? Do you know anybody who knows somebody, or do you know anybody directly?
The tonality is dramatically different.
And there's nothing better than going to a prospect and you can show them that you eat your own cooking.
See how this technology is working. We got a new system here, live stream. Heads of Advisor, welcome to the show. Welcome back. Short break, a little time off. Picking up right where we left off. We're going to bring it to you, teach you how to win more business, market. What else is there to talk about? That's what it's about. Today's show.
More money. Got my mind. Money on my mind.
Yeah, like we always say, salesman needs to be reminded more than need to be taught. And so today, I want to go back to really what is the most important meeting, I think, is the first meeting, right? The intelligence gathering meeting. There's not many people out there that I've seen as good as Craig. I'm sure there are some great ones out there, but Craig is very methodical in how he does it. And so I said, why not start with that?
Yeah. So, I work with brokers all over the country, and I work with other kinds of financial advisors. Might be lawyers, might be CPAs, financial planners, 401k people. But basically, the kind of conversation I typically want to have with them. Of course, we talk about mailbox money and the fact that we can pay finder's fees, and none of them are nonprofits. So that's always of interest to them. So we got to talk about the money. But more importantly, it's really simple, to have a conversation and say, do you have any clients? Do you know anybody who knows somebody, or do you know anybody directly who, from a business perspective, any Virtue Health Alliance broker would be able to have a conversation about, do you know any companies whose, top line's really been impacted, right? Revenue's just stuck. They just can't seem to grow, or their overhead just keeps consuming, their profits. So their profit margin's getting squeezed over and over and over again because of inflation or whatever the message is. And so, I talk to them about those kind of outcomes, right?
And I think what's important, and we can talk about today, listening to the call, guys. I love the call. It was under 20 minutes, really good, really dialed in. And Craig doesn't know some of the things he does because he's done so many calls, but learned a lot on the call. And something that we talk about, and going back to my poker background, how do we give ourselves a competitive advantage, right? And what I heard you say is you're specifically referring to the industry. And so when we would generate lead lists as brokers, even now, as I'm doing brokers, there's different things that we filter out. When you're building a list and you're targeting prospects, right? You might be shotgun and approach top of the funnel marketing, but your team may be doing that, or some cold call or what have you. But when you get specific, where could you dial in as a broker? And we have to start to go, okay. And we talked about this before, going back to my buddy Tom Emmerich at Walmart, right? Why do we have a lot of success? Why were they forced to change, right? Because the biggest problem is getting them to change. Well, they need enough pain. Well, if I go to an industry that has significant pain. I think there was a site, we pulled it up on the site. God, this was when we were in California. Per employee per year profit margin. Look at industry specific. You always say, conferences will say, oh, just look at your current client and go there and you'll find out who your clients are. And I never did it. Then I finally did it and go, oh crap, it's blue collar. Why is it blue collar? Lower profit margin, lower per employee per year profit margin. So if you're going to prospect and you're going to filter from a huge cold list, build your 100, right? 100 targeted accounts. I think you start there and go industry specific. So which industry, number one, has a lot of pain? If you're a veteran, you've got business and customers in that industry, they always like to ask the question, Craig, do you have any other construction companies? Do you have any other, we're just making it up, barbershops, right? Yeah, no. Doesn't matter. But the reality is how do we keep them from saying no? And so when we talk through this, it's a lot of different things is really dialed into how do I make myself more successful with the prospect or give me the best competitive advantage? Now you're talking about you went through a networking guy or you networked to a guy.
Yeah.
And you went specifically after a targeted audience that you knew, hey, this is an industry I have and I want to go after and I have a competitive advantage in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, John, everybody has books of business and you have your clients that I remember I had a retail agency for over 25 years. You had a very short list of clients that I would call friends, and, most of them were customers, right? And then they were either A, B, or C list. So you find out the kind of people you enjoy interfacing with, you find out their industries, you learn something about their business as part of the function of being their healthcare advisor and consultant, broker, and you can leverage that. See, those are assets. You have knowledge, you have inside knowledge of a particular business, the constraints, the challenges, the fears, the uncertainty, the doubt. You know all this stuff from your conversations with the internal team at the company, and you can leverage that because that is a unique asset that somebody else doesn't have. Because remember, a lot of your competitors are really just brokers. They just they connect sellers with buyers, but they don't really do much. Here's all your stuff. When you guys decide what you want, tell us and we'll implement it. Okay, that's not really consulting. That's just brokering, and that's okay. But you could take advantage of all those relationships because when you get a chance to get introduced, or when you get a chance to network to somebody who could introduce you to somebody else who's in the industry, you can pepper them with the inside knowledge, the inside baseball that you've learned from your own clients. And that's a point of leverage that will differentiate you so you don't sound like everybody else.
Yeah, and when you talk about the industry specific, it's just naturally going to come out that you can relate to them based on other clients and tell stories. So, social proof, right? America wants it. Nobody wants to buy anything or do anything without social proof. What does that mean? That means that I don't want to be first. And so I want to know a celebrity does it. There's this guy I met, Craig Lack, back in 2017 before we started the show. He taught me personal branding and has a son who taught personal branding. But back in 2013, you had already been doing videos, so on and so forth, and did that status stuff and TVs and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
when you talk about social proof, that's one avenue to do it because marketing does partially part of your selling for you. But what's interesting in this one is, well, it just so happens that Craig does business. His solution is on one of the top 10, top 5 brokers in the country, is on their health plan. And so Craig decided to do what with prospecting?
Yeah. So when you have one of the top 5 brokerage firms in the world and they have 20,000 employees and they use your solution as an employee benefit, well, then it's really easy to reverse engineer and go, well, why don't we just call on all the offices around the country who obviously don't know that one of their employee benefit options is something they could market to differentiate themselves. And there's nothing better than going to a prospect and you can show them that you eat your own cooking. You know, I always remember in the retail days, if I was talking to an HR person who was going to be the decision maker and influencer, and they weren't on the medical plan, it was always fascinating to see their kind of like pseudo lack of interest because they didn't have a dog in the hunt. So when you can show somebody, not only do we believe in it, but we use it. Well, let me tell you, nobody asks for a reference call.
Yeah, I think it's a little difficult to find because your prospect, I mean, your situation is great, but obviously you took away the obstacles. One of the obstacles is references, right?
Yeah.
Social proof. I don't want to do it first. Well, it just so happens the broker that you're utilizing, it's on their health plan. There's your reference right there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, again, setting these hurdles and other things that you're going to run into to keep the prospect from saying no. Now,
Yeah.
talking
But
about the prospect saying no, go ahead.
everybody has stories, right? So, my story is unique to our value proposition, but every broker has value propositions that are unique to most prospects. They don't know it exists. So, we've talked about this many, many times, right? Don't tell them what it is, but tell them what it does for them. Okay. What does it do for you? Well, so like when I explain, part of our value proposition, it's not so much that anybody cares about the savings, but what do the savings manifest if you're an HR person? How valuable would it be if you could reduce your retention of your key employees that are basically walking knowledge libraries of your business, right? They're very important people because they've been there a long time. They know where all the skeletons are and they're the keeper of the keys. It's really valuable if you can keep them and they don't walk away. What kind of a competitive advantage do you have if you have something that no one else has, or you have something that's measurably and noticeably different, so that when you're recruiting people like nurses, you don't have to give them a $15,000 bonus like everybody else, because nothing else that you offer in benefits is any different than what every other hospital does. But when you do have something different, maybe it's DPC, maybe it's some sort of pharmacy related solution, whatever it is, there's low hanging fruit out there. And a lot of people haven't taken advantage of it, even as hard as that is to believe, even still today. And so you all have the ability to leverage your stories and unique value propositions. You just have to learn how to say it in a way that makes you a business consultant more than a health insurance broker.
Yeah, I got a couple of points I want to pull out that I had written down. What I heard you do in the call was interesting. We'll talk about the hurdle and pushback of where um, they're going to get friction, right? We're talking, I think it was finance or CFO, and basically you defer back to, well, yes, HR is going to block it, so on and so forth, but why should they block it? And you went into the benefit of the employee, which I thought was interesting. Might sound simple, but you started to break down the conditions and the current situations that employees are under stress with the money, right? And so why they love it, and here's what you're up against, and then how does it tie back into you as finance? So
Yeah.
you shifted over to HR and why they love it, and then you went back to finance and the savings.
Yeah, I try to provide a picture of, what does this look like if you're the employee? What does this look like if you're HR? What does this look like if you're finance? Because you can't assume that people are smart enough to grasp kind of the downstream consequences of making the decision to hire you. And so you have to paint them a picture. It's kind of like paint by numbers. So I like to paint them a picture. And then, as you referenced, right, I also like to future pace the conversation because, look, we all know that sometimes the decision makers at employers will just want to kill deals because they don't want to do any extra work. They don't want to make any changes because they feel like it's not necessary. And frankly, there's nobody holding them accountable. I will say everybody's responsible, but not very many people are accountable in their corporations for the healthcare budget. And so the consequence of that is, it leads to a lot of status quo and no changes. So I like to paint future pace a conversation. I just had one today. You want to hear my story today?
Go for it.
Okay. Had a conversation today with a guy who knows all the kind of people that I need to get introduced to at the very largest private equity firms. And so I painted him a picture. I said, so imagine my scenario. I've got $6 million of profit that I can increase this year and every year going forward. Matter of fact, it likely would double in the next 3 to 4 years and continue every year thereafter. Now, if you're trading at a 10 times multiple, 6 million of this year means $60 million of net worth for the CEO. So when the CFO tells me, oh, Craig, man, it's unbelievable. I understand the math. It's a great value proposition. Makes perfect sense to me. But I don't make the decision here. Our culture is such that, I have to give this to the CHRO or whoever, benefits, total rewards. And so I push back. I said, well, let me paint you a picture. Okay, here's what's going to happen. 8 times out of 10, this is what they're going to say. These are the kind of excuses they're going to come up with. And they're going to tell you to not do anything or not tell you anything and just say, we don't think it's a fit. And you're going to go, well, I pay them to, air quotes, manage this.
Well, let me stop you for a second because
Yeah.
I heard you do this, right? You set the hurdle with HR in advance, and then later on he went to what reluctance am I going to get? But the difference, and mostly you hear Craig and me talk on here, we're talking with a little bit of sarcasm, a little, trying to be a little funny and over the top. But the reality is the way you say and do it, and that's really what's particular in this meeting is night and day from the way you're talking on here. And not being needy, and we'll get to that point because I think that's the biggest
important
point. But Craig, I want to pull you back because my job is to pull this out of you. Is you're setting the hurdle basically. So when they go back to HR, you've heard when somebody's done that, and you go, "Here's what they're going to say," and then when they go back to say it, it doesn't carry as much weight, right? That's why you're setting the hurdle that you're going to face with HR. Is that here's exactly what we're going to say. And when they say it, you're like, holy shit, they must be lying. This is true versus kiboshing it because that's what usually happens. But how are you doing it in a tonality, in a different way than the way you're talking on here? Because it's very different.
Yeah. Well, I was that particular call. I was talking to 3 different private equity people. So it was very, very matter of fact, very factual, more like I was giving testimony at court, no expectations. Part of the, what John and I have told you guys many times, not being needy and desperate. It comes across in your tonality. You might be, it's just everybody's different styles, right? But if you get that overly excited, bubbly, kind of thing, you sound really desperate. And so you have to figure out what it is so that you're just neutral. Well, for me, what I try to concentrate on is I don't have any expectations. I'm there. I'm trying to help them. I find out what the facts and circumstances are. And if we can help them, I'm going to tell you how we can do it. But
yeah, you sound
I don't care about the outcome
on
doesn't
the show.
matter.
Yeah, this show you have more confidence, arrogance that you come off as, but on the call, let me be clear, guys, and we can't share for certain reasons, but unless you're a client, then you can reach out to us. We'll probably give it to you. But the reality is the tonality is dramatically different. right? And so, yes, we're teaching you, but keep in mind there's a different side to the way you're talking to them
Yeah,
regarding this
that's
stuff.
true. That's true.
One of the biggest things that one of the biggest things that I see with Craig, and you get this with experience, and you get this with more success, and it's a challenge when you're in the beginning, right? A challenge when you're desperate. Sometimes you go in sales. I mean, even with success
We were all
that I've
there.
had, even with success that you had, and we're talking to the new guys. We a lot of new guys on here, older guys on here. You go through waves of sales sometimes where I'm a complete loser. I can't close for my life,
Can't
and
close
you
the
get
door.
needy, and you start to sound needy, and you start to self doubt,
Yep.
and it's very important to control that on the call. And sometimes I would write stuff, type it out, and then tape it to the top of the thing
Yeah.
to remind myself, building the subconscious is not to sound needy, not to sound wanted, even if you do need it. Because yeah, in the beginning you do need it, but they can hear it and feel it. I talked to a salesman the other day, and I was ready to buy it, and he just turned me off so much because he was so needy that
Mm.
it made me worried. It made me worried, like
Yeah.
I want it, I need it,
That's funny.
what's going on here? But what is
Yeah.
it that you do? You think obviously you've had success, but you go through long sales cycles. What is it that you do or you have in your mind that keeps you at the point of I don't care, I'm not going to sound needy on the call?
Well, I suppose you could say the amount of federal tax I pay reminds me of that, but we're not going to go there. Yeah, because I don't have to be. Because what I know is, see, and this is really a challenge. I mean, I was a broker, I had an agency, and I wasn't particularly a great prospector back then, but that's what it's all about. We have so many leads. We have so much, I don't want for leads. So if somebody doesn't want to play ball, if somebody wants to create friction, if somebody wants to always find a reason why it can't be done, I don't have time to deal with that stuff. So I'm on to the next one. Don't care. So that's a unique advantage that we have. But if more brokers had more prospects to talk to, they could easily behave that way. But the problem is, if you only get one every quarter, you got to really control your tonality and your attitude so that you don't sound. And I'm hanging on every word here, hoping that I can get this deal and win the bake off.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
really the
challenge, but
truth.
it's a
Yeah.
challenge. Look, it's a challenge at times too. But you're absolutely right. When it's flooding, I mean, when it's fourth quarter at Virtue Health, right? People are quoting the stop loss consortium here, and
Yeah.
in the slower time, you're closing less business because there's less renewal, right? 50% is
Yeah.
and you're less picky, right? And when it's fourth quarter, boy, when those quotes come in, the DTQ is very high because I don't need to work on this group and all this work, and I don't care. But it's
Yeah.
so true that you become less needy. So it is a factor of marketing. Geez, it was 7 years.
100%.
Yeah.
And look, John, since you've known me, I've gone from 0 to 10 salespeople now. I mean, it's crazy busy around here.
Yeah. One thing I heard you do a lot of, and I tend to do it. And again, it's easy, guys, when we talk about it, focus on the industry, and having clients in that industry is telling stories, right? So everybody out there has case studies and
Yep.
stories to use, success stories. And look, if you don't have them, again, somebody has the stories. If you're new or you're listening, you just went on your own, Virtue Health, to go to our site, you'll see case studies. If you're selling our program, you're part of our program or whatever program you're selling, they got case studies. They got stories that you can tell and tie into it. So utilize them. I mean, look, if you have cases with them and you don't have the industry, call your rep up or whoever you're doing business with and say, do you have a case like this that I can reference? But
Yeah.
I noticed on the call a lot of stories, like you just said today. Let me tell you a story. And
I
so
do a lot of that now.
what are you doing there normally? Just relaying it back to exactly where they are, or walk me through that.
I try to find common ground with, for most people, I already know what their problems are before I get on the phone with them, right? Because I've researched either their industry or I know their industry. And because of that, you know where the landmines are. So it's like, is recruitment tough in your industry right now? You already know the answer. You only ask them questions you already know the answer to, right? According to, yada, yada, Becker's Hospital Review, average collection rate 17% on people coming to the hospital paying their copays and deductibles and coinsurance to you. Is that a problem? What are you doing to try and fix that? And so basically you're relating your solutions to problems that they have, but you got to get them to tell you what the problems are. If all you do is show up and throw up, features and benefits, you're never going to get the emotional kind of interaction that you need with people. So you got to interact with them in a way that makes sense to them and meet them where they're at and ask them where their priorities are and what are they following up on. And when they tell you that, then you can give them stories. And I have found that stories are the most credible way to really sell, because you're giving them a scenario of, oh, it reminds me of a case that we had where $6 million of claims came in December out of the blue. And the executives, every single one of them, didn't get their bonuses that year. Well, guess who called us? Yeah, the head of benefits called us and said, every year you guys educate us on your best practices, and every year we ignore you. We can't ignore you anymore. How do we get more people in your plan? And so that's a great story. And so every broker, you got to use those stories, because everyone, that prospect can relate to it, and they're like, oh, well, he's been there and done that. She's been there and done that. You don't have to sell.
One of the things that, again, it's like anything creating relationships. We're looking to ways to get in when you're first talking to them, the intelligence gathering, meaning getting them comfortable, getting them to try to give you the information you want. Yeah, you can do it by saying, oh, you're a Cowboys fan, I see this on the wall. Some people say that's bad. Some people say it's good. I think you got to get the people talking and opening up. Now, we always talk about this is, how do I speak to them in their business and reference their business and tie it into my solution? But what I noticed you did on this call was you talked about you went to their site and you saw the product they sold and what they solved for their clients, and kind of talking about, hey, here's the problem and the friction. And now you're talking about what? Your problem that you solve, and tying it together.
Yeah. Because, well, guess what people don't want to do? They don't want to answer stupid questions that if you just spent 15 minutes investigating them online, you should have known the answers to. So when you show up, gee, what does ABC Manufacturing do? What do you make? Who do you sell to? You should have already done all that work. So as soon as you do that, everybody knows you're a putz. You're a rookie, right? I don't know if I can afford your learning curve. But when you show up and you went to their website, like I did for this particular private equity firm, their whole moniker, they had it everywhere. We create alpha. Well, I know what alpha is. So I related my stories to what they represent to their clients. We produce, for the same amount of risk, we create greater returns. That's alpha. And so I related my story to that.
Yeah, what I heard in the call and what I translated in my mind was almost like, hey, here's the solutions that you probably have, and friction you have with your clients in solving the solution or getting them to buy into it. And then you tied it into what you do and the friction that you have. And that was where you set the hurdles with HR, so on and so forth. But I thought it was an interesting point to point out. We're going to close up here shortly. But again, one of the toughest things to do is not just sound needy, but being excited when they tell you, boy, I got a problem, and boom, they're just painting a picture of exactly. And you're telling us, gather, the strategy we talk with the sales funnel of the talk track is getting them to tie your solution into what their problem is. But when they get there, or they're already there in this situation with yours where they were spitting out, is how not to jump in and take them down right there. Like, ooh, I got the answer.
You're so right, John.
And but you, if anybody's been on a call with Craig, you'll hear him do a call and he'll never even mention his solution, which is, you get off the call and go, what the hell just happened? And so what is it that you do, or you're thinking, that you don't even tell them when they're asking for the answer or the solution?
Well, it depends on the circumstances of the call. Like you said, I mean, yeah, theoretically every call could be the same, but that's just not me, right? I like to think I'm good on my feet. So depending on what direction somebody goes, I can go any direction with them. And so I'm prepared to explain my value proposition in, 25 different ways, depending on what their needs are. And so you made a great point. It's really huge, everybody listening to this. Shut up and let them finish talking. As soon as, I see rookies. I've been on a lot of calls with brokers, and they hate silence, and they hate not having the opportunity to show how smart they are to their prospect and their clients. And so when they start going on a roll telling you where their issues are and their fears, uncertainties, and doubts, whatever it is, let them finish. But too often people interrupt and they want to go, I got the solution. We got the, it's embarrassing to watch this stuff. You have to, again, have zero expectations, let them finish, and be very clinical about it, right? Based on what I heard you just say, it sounds like this is an issue. Is that correct? One of the ways we've solved that for other companies similar to yours is we've created these kind of outcomes. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, I think it was interesting where you keep pulling them. It's like they're ready to be served, and you just keep pulling them. And I think it makes it stronger in essence of the overall sale.
I want them to pursue me. I don't want to I don't want to throw up on them.
I had that happen to me one time with a tax strategist, and I had already, did the research before and was waiting for it. It's just waiting for him to give me the answer, and he didn't give it to me. And obviously,
Yeah.
we had to get in a consulting arrangement, so on and so forth. But it made me want it and chase him even more. So I thought that was a interesting part because it is difficult. I fall victim to that talking, getting the solution out, rushing to it, especially if they give me the opening. I'm taking them down.
Yeah, I know. I
Um,
know.
my patience is limited, but yeah, I
We
mean,
all got the same issues, man. Yeah.
and then they mentioned, and then they had the question of which will come up, what kind of results, what kind of this and that, and you tied it to clients and their commitment, and you talked about the different commitments of the clients that you've
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. And again, what was I doing? Storytelling. Well, we did this city and it was union controlled the budget. And once they got it and they understood that every dollar of savings built their reserves, and if the reserves built high enough, it would exceed what they could defend actuarially for healthcare, and they could apply it to their underfunded pension plan, which 90% of them have. It was like, whoa, I saw their heads explode. Right? That's a story. And then there's a health insurance company, and they started here, and within 3 years they got there, and they haven't had a rate increase in 3 years. And here's another story: they haven't had a rate increase in 10 years. All I'm doing is answering their question, but I'm doing it with stories and examples of other employers, and I found that builds a lot more credibility than naked assertions of what you claim to be able to do.
Yeah, and remember we had Jez speak at the event, speak from the stage. Our speaking coach just talked about.
Yeah.
He did his presentation. He just showed the audience. He went to the audience. He did a bunch of numbers, and then he told some stories. And then after, he asked them, "Who remembers what that percentage was?" And that number was right. Third of the room, 10% of the room might remember it, but in the stories, everybody remembered the names. And so, a
Ain't
lot
that
more
the truth?
powerful if you can tie it into it, specifically with the case studies and come
Yeah.
up with your own stuff
And,
here.
and don't let them trap you. So some of the you're gonna guys are gonna run into prospects who have a big box chain store as their consultant, who train them in order to crush independent brokers. And here's what they tell them: ask them how many school districts they have, ask them how many they have in your state, ask them how many employees they have. So they're trying to basically make you compare themselves against them, so you know that you're going to lose. So don't let them do that. So the easy pushback is really simple. Let me ask you a question: do people who have cancer and diabetes in Florida have a different cancer or diabetes than they do in Wisconsin? No. So it really isn't relevant how many ABC employers, industry employees we have in that state. Doesn't matter, right? So you just have to disarm it. But you have to be willing to challenge people, guys. This is the fact. You have to challenge them. They're full of biases and a history of making decisions and buying insurance-related solutions in whatever way they do. And it's almost always wrong, which is why they have the problems they have, because they don't know how to discern between a good solution that actually does something, or some another point solution that majors in minor things that doesn't really benefit anybody.
Yeah, I mean the elephant trainers, going back to the oldest story you always gave us there.
Yeah.
One last thing I'll end on this. Going to another challenge we have. I see you didn't jump at it, right? Bad mouthing the broker, bad mouthing their decision, which is basically a reflection on them. I fall victim to it all the time without even seeing it, right? How did you dance around the fact of shit? Not only you're not bad mouthing the broker, but the broker that you
Yeah.
guys have has the solution on their employee benefit plan, and maybe they're even enrolled in it, and they still haven't shown it to you.
Well, it's kind of a continuum in my brain. And for me, I will treat them as they've treated me. Because I can. So, so on one end of the continuum, if they get me prickly and they go, "Wow, I don't know, it sounds like your solution is really expensive." I said, "Well, that's a fascinating way to look at it. Let's get granular on that. So, how much do you pay your broker? How much was the increase last year? How much was the increase for the last 3 years? So in the last 3 years, you paid $1 million to your broker to lose $7.5 million of profit of your company. Now let's contrast that against my value proposition." And I go, "Now get done with it." And you're like, "I'm confused. Who's expensive?" So, we can go there, or we can just go to what I typically do is just look at the outcomes and go, "Look, you own a health insurance company, you're self-insured. Don't know if you realize that. Let me explain it to you." Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Never thought of it that way. Okay. So you have an algorithm to run that insurance business. The challenge with your algorithm is it's guaranteed to lose your money. Here's why. Boom, boom, boom. Now, our value proposition is simple. You're guaranteed to make money. Let me explain how that works. compare and contrast the two algorithms. Now, which outcome would you rather have? You have no way to create certainty around your controlling your healthcare budget, but we do. And therein lies the rub between the difference between the outcomes you're getting currently based on the advice you're paying somebody to give you on how to control healthcare costs versus what we can do, which is measurable, predictable, and repeatable. And we've been doing it for 22 years. So again, you can make up your own story. I don't have to ever talk about the broker. I just talk about the outcomes they produce. That makes sense?
There you go. Absolutely. We'll wrap it there. I think we covered enough. Go back and look through this episode, dial it in, write it down, come up with your speech, your talk for that first meeting.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Again, going back to we need to study more than we need to be taught. So Heads Up Advisor, good show. Talk to you later.
Awesome.
Bye.
See you next week.